Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, and I'm here with my partner, Pete. How are you this morning, Pete?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is good. And today we have a special guest, Milo Denison, who's living in the UK like you, Pete. And he is actor on stage, on film, on screen, and also director.
And writer. He is a modern day Renaissance man.
That's how I introduce myself is they're like, hey, Milo, tell us about yourself. And I'm like, I'm a Renaissance man.
That's right.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us today, Milo.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great.
Of course. The past few weeks, Pete and I have seen Creed 3, and we've done a review, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium, and done a review. And it seems like more and more we are seeing things that are either prequels, sequels, or reboots. And one of the things we wanted to talk to you about today was, how do you approach these, either when you're given material as an actor, when someone's looking to collaborate with you as a director? Like, do you approach this material differently? Is it easier, harder? How do you view it?
Well, as an actor, I'm a whore, right? So if you're going to pay me to do acting, I'll do it. And even if it's like, they're like, hey, Milo, we want you to do whatever. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's been done 1,000 times before. Thanks for doing this series. And I'll absolutely do it. But I think the key with actors, especially because you're taking, generally if it's a reboot or a sequel, you're often taking over a role that somebody else has already done. Mm-hmm. And so you want to do it in a way that like is an homage to the original character and whoever played the role, but as you're also your own person. So you need to do kind of your own little take on it and your own twist. But right. The key, I think, is always to think about the audience. And because as an audience member, we go in and watch something and we're taking our memories of it in that, right? And we want to see certain aspects. So obviously you guys are Tom Cruise fans, Pete and Ethan, and you watched the new Top Gun movie that came out last year, right? So we all went, yes, exactly. So we all went in there thinking the original Top Gun movie, and how is this going to be a sequel to that? And one of the things about that particular movie, I know Tom Cruise obviously played the same character, but they respected the audience that loved that movie originally in a lot of ways and gave us a lot of what we wanted to see. I think, in my opinion, I don't know about your guys' opinions. Mm-hmm. And so as an actor, if you're taking over another character, you need to take that into consideration. I was just watching a thing with, what's her name? The girl that does Wednesday.
Jenna Ortega.
Yeah, Jenna Ortega. And she was talking about that, how she paid respect to the 1960s series, the movies and that kind of stuff, but she still has to kind of do her own little interpretation on it because she's bringing it to a new audience in a lot of ways. So that's it.
So generally, do you enjoy watching reboots and remakes, or do you feel like it's hard to, still be loyal to kind of the original? Like, what's your take as a fan, and what's your take as someone in the entertainment industry?
I'm not for the most part, I'm not a fan. And for the most part, I'm not, because here's the problem. It's not so much the redoing it of it. It's the lack of interest in Hollywood in doing anything new. Yeah. Right. So it's like, let's take something and just remake it, because I'm sure some people will want to see it because they like the first one. Right. Like they're coming out with the Ghostbusters movies, right? Everybody loved the Ghostbuster movies. And it's like, okay, well, we can't get the original guys to do a sequel. So let's reboot it. But that's twist it up and make it like all women this time. And not that I have any problem with that. It's just the fact that the idea of like, well, could we maybe have a mixed cast? How about like a couple guys and a couple girls? Or how about we do something different that involves ghosts? Entirely. It can still be a ghost comedy, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the Magnum PI series. I love the old Magnum PI, right?
Yeah.
Love it. And I would have loved to see a movie with those original characters. Even now, like, 30 years later, let's take Magnum, and I know a couple of them are dead now. Let's take Magnum and the other guys and put them in a situation of like, where are they now? And turn that into a movie. Right. But no, they create some. Can I swear on your guys' show?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, they create some super shitty TV show that shot like everything else is nowadays with like extreme every conversation is an extreme close up, right? Everything's the shaky movie camera thing because it's dramatic, and they just ruin them all. It is the big problem. You look at all the old 80s series that were turned into movies, the A-Team, any of that kind of stuff. They take an old series, they turn it into a movie. It's comedic, it's actiony, and it's stupid. So that's generally my problem with the reboots. Same with like, Star Trek, right? You look at the Star Trek movies and it's like every single Star Trek of the new Kelvin timelines of the series that they have out now too, it's just rehashing all of the old stuff. The only good new Star Trek, I shouldn't say it, the only good new Star Trek series is Lower Decks. And why is Lower Decks good? Because
he loves Lower Decks.
It's
loves
so
Lower
good.
Decks. Yeah.
I said that to my co-host on my podcast as well. He hates all the new Star Trek stuff too, and I don't really hate it, but and I'm like, dude, you need to watch Lower Decks. You will love Lower Decks because it respects the original, the Next Generations, all that kind of stuff. It has good throwbacks. But it's new stories. It's a continuation versus just taking the old crap and rehashing it. So
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment here.
How dare
I
you?
hear you. I hear what you're saying. But what do you say to the idea that, okay, so Star Trek came out in the 60s. Star Wars came out in the 70s and 80s. The originals anyway, right? And then you've got these legacy sequels, and I think what you're saying probably applies more to the idea of a reboot or a reimagining, maybe less so for a legacy sequel, but conceptually, at least in terms of physical time, probably around the same amount of time passes, 15, 20 years, and then they start rehashing these things, right? My feeling has always been that I love Star Trek. I loved it as a kid growing up. And yes, I don't necessarily want to see the same thing again, but now what happens is, I'm now 20, 30 years older, and if I've got kids or if I've got nephews and nieces, this is something that I can share with them, because I know that if they were to sit down and if I forced them to watch the original Shatner or even the original Patrick Stewart Star Treks, although I think the TNG, for example, may be a bad example because it still holds up in my opinion. But I know that they would watch that, and within 5 minutes, they'd be like, this is garbage. I don't want to watch it. The effects are terrible. The acting is wooden. Everything is bad. I mean, they wouldn't use that many words, but they would hate it.
Yeah.
You
Whereas
think it needs to be refreshed.
Yes, or at least to make it a little bit more palatable to the younger generation.
Yeah, you can do that. So you mentioned Did you mention Star Wars? If not, I'm mentioning Star Wars right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you did mention Star Wars.
You should. It's obligatory on this podcast. Actually.
Okay. So Star Wars managed to do that. So let's ignore episodes 1, 2, and 3 and pretend those were never made. All right.
Agree.
So let's say the new movies or the series, you can tell they take place in the same universe, in the same world. The technology makes sense, right? So you get on the Millennium Falcon, it looks the same as the Millennium Falcon that was in episodes 4, 5, and 6. And they press a button and it kind of looks the same and it sounds the same. But you jump over into Star Trek, into the Star Trek universe, and you have Star Trek Discovery, which is appropriate when you refer to it as an STD, because STD has this ship that was built prior to the series wheel that's supposed to take place before we are ever introduced to the Enterprise and the technology on that from the original series and all that kind of stuff. Yet it's massive on the inside, but not as massive on the outside for some weird reason, like the TARDIS. It has all this technology that was never introduced in the original 60s series or the movies. It has an entirely different look to it, right? So to your point, that in the Star Wars universe, if I were to sit down with a kid and show a kid The Mandalorian, they would still appreciate it because I think they're making new episodes, so obviously somebody's watching it. They could still appreciate it and watch it and enjoy it, and then maybe potentially go back to the older movies or something like that. To whereas I think if you show a kid a lot of the new Star Trek stuff, they wouldn't necessarily go back and watch those movies because they're so different. They're so like the Star Trek stuff is it's like a Michael Bay movie, right? You watch any of the new Star Trek movies, and it's lens flare everywhere, it's constant action sequences, it's rolling camera movements and all this stuff, and there's no story to it anymore. Like, one of the reasons why we liked the original Star Trek is you're connected to the characters. You're connected to Spock and Kirk and all of them and their friendships that they have. Like, you watch the what was it, 5, where they're out camping. And I'm not saying that's a good movie, but I'm just saying, like, they have that opening sequence where they're out camping and going rock climbing, right? And you would believe that these people would hang out together and actually go camping when they're not working, right? The new Kirk and the new emo Spock, they would never hang out outside of working together because they're all dicks to each other. Like, why are they even trying to help each other? Because all they ever do is fight.
Yeah.
So it's very different.
I mean, that's a true reboot, right? I mean, when you talk about Star Trek, I mean, again, there's been, James T. Kirk, right, is so ingrained through, television and film, right, that it's always been the same character. And then when you recast Chris Pine, it's the same thing. If you would do the same thing, maybe a little bit more iconically, with Luke Skywalker or Han Solo or something, it's really hard to get your mind wrapped around this entire new character. And yes, to see like the interpersonal relationships between the folks then. I think for that reason, Star Trek, and it's pulled it off probably about as well as could be, but I think that's one of the significant differences between those two sci-fi franchises, is that Star Wars has agreed that its characters are untouchable, and they've done a lot of other like spin-offs and series, whereas Star Trek hasn't done that. They kind of like regurgitate the same characters, but with a different actor playing them.
I think also the difference is potentially that, at least prior to the last 3 or 4 years, Star Trek was primarily a TV platform that transitioned into the cinema. But really, the core of Star Trek has always been, or at least for me, was TNG first, but that's only due to circumstance of age. But I would imagine it was the original series, then TNG, or vice versa for most of us. I think that a smaller percentage Voyager, a smaller percentage even more so for Deep Space Nine. Then after that, I think this is where, the problem I have with the Star Trek universe in terms of the TV shows is after DS9, things start to go a little awry for me, because you start getting into situations that maybe with Enterprise it started, but where it felt less and less like Star Trek and felt more and more like an action sequence movie or a police procedural or something like that. And that's definitely like, for example, for like the current seasons of Picard, right? Which are like what we would consider a legacy sequel to The Next Generation. I love the characters, but seasons 1 and 2, I have been less and less excited about, because it doesn't feel like The Next Generation. It doesn't feel like Star Trek anymore. And I know this is going to make me sound like, oh, get off my lawn. I'm an old man now, but they're cursing left, right, and center.
On Picard?
Yeah. Oh, all of them. Like,
no way.
They're dropping F-bombs like there's no tomorrow.
On Picard?
And they never did that on the original TV series, on any of them.
No.
And certainly it's because, one's on a streaming platform and one, was on a proper, like regular broadcast network channel. Fine, I understand that. But then it was less action. It was more like almost like a puzzle, in the sense that there was a mystery to be solved, and you didn't shoot your way out of it. Of course, there were certain times they did, but it was more about diplomacy. It was more intelligent. It felt like chess versus checkers, right? And I always used to make that joke, which was that Star Trek is chess and Star Wars is checkers. You go for Star Wars because it's fun, action-packed, but it's 90 minutes and you're done. Because back then, Star Wars was also just movies. And now I feel like they've flipped the script almost entirely, where you're not seeing the heart of Star Trek, which was about exploration, which was about diplomacy, which was about trying to figure out solutions to problems that didn't involve you giving everyone the finger and firing photon torpedoes left, right, and center.
Yeah, I think that no, you summed it up perfectly. The Star Trek works really well as a series. And each episode they go, they explore, they experience new things. And it's about, a better future, right?
Yes.
To whereas Picard is
exactly.
Ignore all that. The future sucks. Everybody hates each other. Let's shoot first, talk later, and swear about it. Yeah. My co-host, he refers to it as rated R Trek, which is really what the new Star Treks are.
That's fun. That's funny.
Yeah,
that's fine, because you're right. That's absolutely right. It feels far more dystopian than it should. And I'm not saying that that's realistic or not realistic, but the whole point of Star Trek was that it was a utopian ideal of what the future could be. Yeah. And maybe not should be, but hey, look, if everything plays out right, this is what we should strive for. And it was one of the few places where you saw diversity and inclusivity that didn't feel forced. It felt natural that, yes, it makes sense that we have a Black person, an Asian person, a Latino person, or whatever. And it didn't feel like, well, they're just doing it because, that's how you get ratings. Because the show came out in the 60s. It came out in the 90s. They weren't aiming for that kind of diversity back then, or
it was ahead of its time. It was really ahead of its time.
And I know I'm being super cynical when I say this, but I feel like 90% of casting decisions today, as a consumer, and you probably know more because you've been on the other side of that scenario, but as a consumer, I can't help but feel that a lot of the diversity that you see today on screen, which by the way is a good thing, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I feel like a lot of it is forced, and it's almost kind of done by like executives in service of PR and in service of finances more than it is in service of the story. And when you have that, I think that becomes a problem for the story.
I totally agree with you. I was on a set actually with a guy, and he's Asian, and we were talking about getting cast and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, I get calls all the time for stuff. He's like, look, have you seen such and such commercial? I'm in that. And he's like, because I'm Asian. And he was honest with it. Yeah, because we live in London and there's not a lot of Asian actors in London. And I'm like, yeah, dude, tell me about it. I'm a white male. Like, there's a lot of us in London. And you're right. It is a good thing, right? Because there used to not be a lot of diversity, especially when it came to like good roles for women and that kind of stuff. And I know another guy, he has a disability, and he's like, I'm getting more calls now because people want person with like a real disability versus just an actor faking it, which is great too. Although, part of acting is playing characters, but we won't get into that. Yeah, exactly. But I do think in a lot of ways it is really good. However, to your point, I just watched the first episode of that 90s show, talk about reboots and sequels and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. And is it good? Did you like it?
I'm holding out judgment on it. There were aspects that I liked, but one of the things that did kind of annoy me is you had the Black girl, the gay boy, the, white main protagonist, the, like literally you just go through like the whole every character in there. And you're like, okay, they've got that one, check. All right.
United Colors of Benetton.
And I'm like, maybe they'd all be friends. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't. But like, you could tell it was cast based on checking all these boxes because they don't want. And that's the hard thing with comedies nowadays too, because everything's so worried about offending somebody that you lose a lot of humor because of that. Because that's what comedy is in a lot of ways being offensive. That's why Blazing Saddles is so hilarious, because it's so offensive.
Yeah.
Oh man, I haven't thought about that film in a long time. That's Billy Crystal, right?
No, Blazing Saddles is Billy, the other guy from Young Frankenstein.
Gene Wilder, are we talking
Gene
Oh
about?
yeah,
Wilder.
Gene Wilder.
That's something.
Yeah.
Gene Wilder, and I can't remember the other actor's name.
Oh man, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
I know that's why I'm having hard struggling with all the actors.
And
names.
FYI, in case you've missed it, we've got the unofficial, or well, actually not unofficial, the official sequel to The History of the World coming out.
I saw that. Yeah.
But instead of a movie, they're doing it as a TV series, I guess. So that should be fun. Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
So,
But yeah,
so Milo,
sorry.
is there? Sorry, I was going to say, is there like a sequel or a reboot, either movie or television show or franchise that you think was done extremely well, and that you'd be proud to have your name associated with? Like, is there something that sticks out in your mind as a good example?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Yeah, I do think they do good reboots and stuff, and some sequels. Gosh, I might have to think about that for a second. Not the Indiana Jones movies.
Oh,
Unless-
that's a good one because that's coming out soon, right?
Yeah, we got the new one coming out. But there you go. Like the first three movies were brilliant, and just leave it at that. Like you don't need to keep milking it.
The thing Pete and I said, which is going to make or break this movie, is how much of the technology where they like change
de-aging.
someone's age, the
Yeah.
de-aging, how much of that is actually used, and if it's done well or if it's done not well. I think that's going to have a huge impact on how we think about that film.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the de-aging thing in general. I still think it does look fake anytime I see it. And you used to cast young actors, so why not cast young actors anymore?
Yeah.
I can't think of one off the top of my head to answer your question. I'll probably think of one an hour after we stop recording.
Add it to your comments to the podcast.
There you go. Yeah.
I know that we've been pussyfooting around it, but I looked at the Star Trek reboots, the Kelvin timeline, right?
Mhm.
And I had mixed feelings about it, of course, but I think overall, the one thing I liked about the Star Trek reboots was that it introduced Star Trek to a new generation of viewers. And I think the success of those movies is also why we have a more commercial interest in having shows like Lower Decks, which I have maintained for the last 3 years of doing this pod, that is probably the best Star Trek since TNG. I actually
100%.
really like it because, like you rightly said, it's very clear about being within the same universe, but it shows you a different side of it, which we maybe would have thought about, but maybe not, about the crew members. And it does it in a wholly unique way, right? It's a comedy. It's a pure comedy, which we don't get from any other of the other IP.
Yeah.
Have you
true.
watched Strange New Worlds?
I have.
What did you think of that?
It's not bad, but it's the same scenario where like it's just taking characters that we already know and trying to milk them a bit more. And the Enterprise. Okay, so this is supposedly Kirk's Enterprise in that timeline, right?
Yeah.
Then why is it so fucking big?
Yeah.
Right? Did it shrink? Like, does space shrink spaceships?
Yeah.
Is there something that happened before it gets handed over to Kirk that they have some alien encounter that causes the ship to shrink? Because it's larger.
Yeah.
The captain's quarters is massive.
Oh man.
And
he's
and
got like the whole dining room table in there. He's
Yeah.
got the hibachi bar. Yeah, it's super big.
Let's say of all the new TV shows, because I think what's clear is that, to their credit or discredit, depending on how you see it, the one thing that Disney and Marvel has done has monetized the idea of a shared universe, right? And they did it successfully with the movies. I would argue maybe slightly less successfully lately. And they've tried with limited success on TV. And so I think everyone is trying to do something like that now. And I think Paramount is definitely trying to do that with Star Trek, right? Is they want to create this shared universe that's maybe differentiated only by time, right? Like we saw that with TNG and Voyager, there was a physical geographic distance, right? She was in the Delta Quadrant, everybody else was in the Alpha Quadrant. So that's fine. This new this new era of Star Trek is that they want to build this shared universe. And of all the new shared universe stories, I think that Strange New Worlds, again, I'm not sure how much I like the idea of going back to Kirk, or in this case, not even Kirk, right? It was
prior to him, Pike,
Pike.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that beyond that, I do think the show itself goes back to the roots of what Star Trek is more than the current other crop. It's less about action. It's less about all of these things. Of course, it has it, like the originals also did, but it's much more, it gives me that same feeling of hope of a utopian society than the other shows have done so far.
Yeah, I think if it weren't for any of the other Star Trek stuff, I would certainly appreciate it more.
Yeah.
You have to try to ignore all of that, but they could have taken that show and put it in the future, post TNG era, maybe even post Picard era, right?
Yeah.
And had similar characters, maybe instead of Pike, it's Pike's great grandson or whatever like that, that's in command of the ship, that kind of stuff. So that way you can still have the same type of characters, the same character traits. It allows you to introduce the new technology that they've introduced in it that was never seen prior to that. And it allows you to have the larger enterprise. And it's in the same universe. And I would believe it. I would watch it and I'd be like, okay, this works, right? That's why it worked with The Next Generation, is because it was the continuation. And if they had done that with it, I think I would appreciate it more versus, oh, well, people loved it when we did this little Pike bit on STD. So let's create a whole series.
Let's spin them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is Pike that popular as a character? Like among the Trekkies, does he have like a special place of affinity or affection?
I don't know.
I mean, recognized name, but is he really?
Probably not. But again, I think this is the influence of the new Kelvin movies, because he was obviously not the main primary hero, but he plays a significant part in recruiting Kirk and so forth. So he gets more screen time than I think he would have otherwise.
Yeah. I did think of something about like reboot sequel thing.
Oh, yeah.
The new, I mentioned Ghostbusters actually, but the new Ghostbusters, the
Afterlife,
with the kids. I actually
with Paul Rudd.
Yeah, I thought that was good. So it took place in the same universe. It was a continuation of the story. It had the cameos by the guys at the end. That's great. But it actually worked because it was introducing it with new characters, new stories, and I thought Afterlife worked.
Yeah, we were kind of lukewarm on the movie, but in terms of like a storyline, we agree that like it made sense how they made it a continuation, 20 or 25 years later. I think we were okay with that, Pete. We didn't love all parts of the movie, but generally totally. I think we were okay with how they came up with the overall plot.
Yeah, and I think that this goes to the wider discussion, which is the difference between, a legacy sequel or a long gestating sequel, whatever you want to call it, and a reboot, right? And I think Ghostbusters is a great example of that, right? Because we saw this version of Ghostbusters, The Afterlife, which was set in the same universe, had the same characters. We got great cameos and a not so great ghost cameo towards the end of the movie. But for example, if you go to Melissa McCarthy's Ghostbuster reboot with Kristen Wiig from 10 years ago or whatever it was, that I thought was more of a reboot because they go out of their way to kind of ignore. This is what I didn't like about it, because you can't have it both ways, right? They go out of their way to say that this is a reboot, but then at the end of the movie, they reintroduce Ernie Hudson and he gives them Ecto-1, the car. It was... Well, okay, what is it? Are you a legacy sequel? Are you a reboot? And if you are a reboot and you're going to ignore everything that happened in New York in the 80s, then how can you have Ernie Hudson say that, oh, well, my uncle's going to give you this car?
That's the homage. That's the homage that Milo, I think, mentioned at the very outset of this is if you're going to do a reboot, it's okay, but you really need to like put it in context of the history of the franchise. Sure,
but then if that's the case, then if you're going to put it in context, then you have to do context justice as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You can't, and in this case, I mean, again, it has nothing to do with the fact that it was 4 women versus 4 men. I think it was just a bad movie. I
Absolutely.
Just
don't
like
it.
just like Oceans. What was the most recent?
Oh yeah,
Oceans.
Oceans 8 versus
Yeah,
11,
Ocean's
12,
8,
and 13.
Yep. Mhm.
I mean, which to be honest, that would have been a better movie. Just like the Ghostbusters movie would have been a better movie had they not used the same title and just done an independent movie. Ocean's 8 could have been okay, but there's no reasons to call it Ocean's 8. All you know is Danny Ocean, and you're bringing in all the other like assumptions and like good vibes that we had from that series.
Yeah, because that's what happens is you get the baggage of the movies that
Yeah.
preceded it, and
Yeah.
you get the expectations of the movies that preceded it.
Yeah.
And for all their faults, I enjoyed the Oceans trilogy, the new Oceans trilogy with George Clooney, because they were quirky. They were, heist movies, which I like, but they were also like stylish, and it was something that we hadn't really seen before. And all the characters had genuinely funny interactions with each other, right?
Yeah.
The brothers actually felt like brothers.
Mhm.
The computer geek felt like a computer geek. All these things, like you felt like that was a genuine cast of characters. And I did not feel that way with Ocean's 8 remake. Yeah.
Yeah, they were just trying to, milk it a little bit more, which was a problem. Which technically you could consider Ocean's 11 a reboot, right?
Of course. Of course.
So how do you distinguish between a reboot and just a remake? Is a reboot something where they plan to do sequels, and a remake's just something where they're not doing sequels?
That's a great question, because
are we using the right words?
Look at Gone in 60 Seconds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's call everything into question.
Yeah, Gone in 60 Seconds
was a great remake.
Mm-hmm.
I say great only because I love Nicolas Cage and he can do no wrong no matter what.
So I guess I'm thinking of this on the fly, and I'll use like Ghostbusters as an example. So a remake, I guess, would be if you brought back the Ghostbusters with 4 dudes. And then I think that what they did with the Ghostbusters with the 4 women is something entirely different. I don't think that's a reboot or a remake. But I would then consider Afterlife. Is that a sequel or is that a reboot? Because I feel like a sequel is like you've got Star Wars, right? And then you've got Return of the Jedi. That's like a clear sequel. It's the same characters. It's a direct continuation of the storyline. But a reboot, it seems like there's a jump in time, and you primarily swap out the characters, but there is like a continuation of the story in a way. So I'd consider Ghostbusters Afterlife maybe a reboot.
You've asked a very philosophical question.
Yeah.
Which is great, but also something that I'm ill prepared to answer. Let's put it that way.
So for example, are the Batman movies reboots then? Because they're completely different.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I have always considered them reboots, right? Every generation I consider a reboot.
Yeah. So you think you use reboot instead of remake? That's a reboot.
That is 100% a reboot. You're absolutely right. It's because I think that's probably the distinction. The distinction I would probably say is a remake is I would consider Gone in 60 Seconds a remake because it's basically the same plot and same concept. I would consider the Batman series, all of the individual generations, as reboots because you're taking the same character but different circumstances.
This is important for what's happening in the DC universe, right?
Yeah. So they're rebooting everything.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess
I have so many complicated thoughts about that.
And
it changes every day.
Yeah, once Aquaman, once Shazam, and once Flash are done, then everything is being rebooted.
Yeah, but again,
Superman is rebooted, Wonder Woman's rebooted.
All of that's absolutely true, but then DC throws a spanner in the works because I fully expect the Flash movie is going to make a boatload of money. And when that happens, eventually someone at Warner Brothers, I don't care how much power James Gunn has, is going to come and say, we're going to make a Flash 2 sequel because it made $1 billion.
With the same dude?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, and then we're going to get into
how
the same
DC,
trouble.
every 5 years, it's the same story with DC, right? All right, guys, we're starting from scratch.
They can't help themselves.
Yep.
They cannot.
So let's see time will tell if James Gunn and Peter Safran have the hold on Warner Brothers, or at least on the DC Comics universe, as strong as they seem to.
He really does not want to do another Flash.
Yeah.
I'm sure he doesn't
Or
want to do the
certainly not with
existing
Ezra
Flash with
Miller.
Ezra Miller.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that'll be the thing. I don't know. You're right. It will make a ton of money. I don't know if they'll do it just because of the whole Ezra Miller thing. But if it makes crap tons of money, the dollar is what makes decisions in
I mean,
studios.
I trust James Gunn slightly less than I used to, but like Zaslav, I don't trust at all.
Mhm.
And he's a good businessman, but that's the thing, is that he's a business guy. And actually, you probably have experienced this, right? Like, to what extent are you putting on your creative hat when you're writing or directing something versus you also know at the back of your mind that, hey, whatever I make also needs to be a commercial success, right? Or I also want it to be a commercial success.
Well, yeah. Anytime anyone makes anything, they want it to be a commercial success.
Yeah.
And if they say they don't, they're lying. I'm an artist. I don't care about that. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think I talk to other filmmakers and stuff, and especially when you're writing, you need to think about the potential budget for whatever it is you're writing and how you're going to make it. Like, so on my scale, we're very small, low budget stuff. So when I write stuff, I'm thinking, minimal locations, minimal, like, how can I actually shoot this on a budget? I'm not thinking generally big special effects. And I mean, truthfully, nowadays you can do, I know a guy who just did a Star Wars fan film in Unreal Engine. And,
oh, wow.
And he submitted to some festivals and is doing really well. So basically this dude made an entire film on his computer. And so special effects nowadays you can do that on the cheap, truthfully. But yeah, you definitely need to keep that in mind when you're writing. What
franchise would you be like just thrilled if someone came to you and said, hey, Milo, we want to reboot, we want to do a remake, we'd like you to, like come up with a storyline. Which one would you be like, oh man, like this is like a dream come true?
Buck Rogers.
Buck Rogers?
Buck Rogers or Flash.
Oh, that's
Gordon.
A good one.
Yeah.
God, what I haven't heard that name in a long time. Good call.
Why do I always associate Buck Rogers with Battlestar Galactica? Did those come out?
Because they were both made by Glenn Larson, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think they were.
Oh, there you go.
And there's been a reboot of Battlestar Galactica. That was a reboot, right?
Yeah, you'd call that a reboot.
Did you like it?
I didn't. I know I'm going to get hate mail for this, but I didn't like it. My wife loved it. And I'm like, this is so boring and so obnoxious and so pretentious.
It was so slow. I liked a lot of things about it, except the pace I felt was just glacial. And if they could have like made it a little bit snappier, I probably would have gotten more behind it.
Yeah, the original work, because it was fun. It had some action in it, but this one's like, and then you're like, oh, is this person a Cylon? I don't know. Are they a Cylon?
I agree.
Oh, every episode, is this person a Cylon or not?
It was not nearly as optimistic as the original. Oh man, Buck Rogers though, that would be a cool one.
I think Buck Rogers would be fun. I mean, they have.
Why is that one not been remade? That's a great.
That's what IP. I'm saying. Like, it's good quality content. It hasn't been redone. You've got a fan base for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the next generation would love it as well.
Absolutely.
And that you could build you could build a universe around.
You could build a universe around it. You hear that, Hollywood? I've got the idea. Give me a call. I'm easy to track down. There's not a lot of Milo Denisons out there. We'll make this happen.
Oh man, that would be cool. Pete, what about you? What would you choose?
So, I mean, we joked about it, but the one thing that I think Hollywood hasn't been doing, and it's purely because I can understand that it's not a commercially, maybe not viable, but let's say a commercially valuable thing to do. I don't know, man. There was a missing charm to the idea of a good like parody / satire or spoof movie. I'm talking Airplane. I'm talking Police Squad / Naked Gun
2.5. Yeah.
The Loaded Weapons, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, something silly like that. I haven't seen a good one like that. And I'm not counting the, Not a Scary Movie kind of series, not that franchise. I haven't seen a good one like that in a long time. And I do tend to find myself wanting, if I want to laugh, like those are the movies I'd go back to from the past. But I would go for a comedy. Whatever it is, I'd do a comedy. I think it's just, Another thing that Hollywood's trending away from in the last decade or so, maybe more. Like, I can't remember the last pure comedy I saw in the cinema.
Oh yeah. Didn't you and I talk about how we're surprised that Three Men and a Baby hasn't been rebooted?
Conceptually, it totally works.
Yeah, that one really works now.
It's such a simple concept.
Yeah, because back when that was made, I don't remember what year. I'm gonna guess like early '90s. The idea of like three dudes raising a kid was like unique, right? But now that would like fit culturally, like it would be an easy one to do, right?
Yeah.
And you could still talk about like the same complications and, scheduling, comedic value that you would otherwise have. But I'm surprised that franchise hasn't been picked up again, because I thought that's an easy one to do.
The modern interpretation would be like they're in a throuple somehow.
Yeah.
This is one of the few times where I would think that having three women and a baby would be less funny or comedic than three men and a baby. Because I think, and of course, this is very misogynistic of the time. Certainly, anyone can raise a baby as long as you're caring as a parent, regardless of being a man or a woman. But I think the idea was in the 90s anyway, was right. Like, men raising babies, come on, don't make me laugh. That's ridiculous, right? So,
especially those three guys. Like,
well, yeah.
All right, let's see if we can get Buck Rogers remade. That'll be our resolution for 2023.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. But it's really true. I mean, we've seen. I mean, Pete and I talk about it almost every week when we've got an episode, that either we have seen a movie that is rebooted, remade, or it's some type of sequel. Even now, when we talked about like what we're going to see in the next couple of weeks, what do we have coming out? Guardians of the Galaxy, Indiana Jones. Pete, what else?
Shazam.
Okay,
so superhero movies, let's discount, because most of them are obviously building on IP that will continue. But
Indiana Jones is or Mission Impossible as well. Yeah,
I looked it up actually before talking to you guys of like the top grossing movies of 2022, and 8 of those were sequels or reboots or like that kind of stuff. So of the top 10 movies.
Is Avatar 2022 or 2023?
2022 officially.
Yeah, so it showed up on my 2022 list.
Even though a bulk of the money was made, I mean, I say a bulk, it still made $1 billion in the 8 days that it was out in 2022. But still, a bulk of the rest of its money came in 23.
Well, Titanic is maybe the one movie that James Cameron has made that there is not a natural sequel to that. Maybe
we'll get
everything else that he makes is.
You say that, but can you imagine if they made a prequel or if they made a TV series? Of course they could, right? It would be like a modern day version of The Love Boat, but not comedic. It would be a funny thing. It would be a serious drama.
As the audience, we know what's going to happen, but they don't. So we get 6 seasons of waiting for the boat to crash.
Exactly.
Unlikely. So Indiana Jones, I think, is the next big one that's not within MCU or not like a sci-fi.
Well, John Wick at the end of this month.
Oh yeah, John Wick. Is that number 4 for John Wick?
That is number 4.
Yeah, and they're doing a spin-off of that.
They are.
Yep, it's
what's the spin-off?
The TV one, right?
I don't remember if it's a TV or movie, but it's a female character is the lead in this one. It's the girl that you remember, the girl from the first Kingsman movie, the badass with the leg thingies that. Kicked everybody's butt.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to be her. So if it is, I mean, she's badass. So I'd
totally
support that.
What's her connection to John Wick?
I don't know. I just saw like scanning the news at some point. John Wick spin-off starring so and so, and
she'll get introduced in one of these movies.
Probably.
I mean, it must be this one then.
I don't know if they're going forward or not, but for the last 2 years or 3 years, they've been talking about doing a TV series called The Continental, which will revolve around the hotel and the infrastructure of that nightlife, which I like principally, right? Because it's set in the same universe, but not about John Wick. It's conceptually what they've done with Lower Decks, which is set in the same universe, but not about Jean-Luc Picard or anyone.
Yeah, so
I
that
could
might
get behind
work.
that as well.
Yeah, I could get behind it. We'll see how they do it.
And I like Lance Reddick. If they bring him in there, it'll be good fun to see him. So
that's the other thing. It depends on who's involved in it. You know, like Star Trek might be better without Alex Kurtzman.
Maybe.
But they don't have any plans now for another like Star Trek, right? I mean, we ended with Star Trek Beyond, and that's 2018. It's just TV series right now, right? They don't have any other plans to
They keep talking about doing a movie.
Fourth one, yeah.
Yeah, but they're having a hard time. Like the actors want money, the scheduling, the studio doesn't want to spend a lot of money because really the movies don't make a ton. Like,
Who's
I don't know,
going to
there's a big
direct?
debate.
They asked
Yeah,
Quentin Tarantino
yeah, that's
to
right.
direct.
The director
so-
changed, yeah.
I mean, the one thing I liked about that was because he was when I can't remember. I think he was on a podcast with maybe Conan O'Brien or someone else. I can't remember, but he was talking about that, and he did mention the one thing that would be good about a Quentin Tarantino movie is it would be tightly focused, and I don't think it would have the budget that the last two movies. I don't think that he would want $200 million to make a Star Trek movie. I think his idea would be like, let's set it all in the holodeck or in like on the bridge or in like one or two small locations and leave it at that and make it like a character piece. Obviously I'm being specious, but still like that's the kind of thing. And I trust Quentin Tarantino as a writer and as a director to make it work.
Oh man, I want to see someone's got to do like a fan piece on like what a Tarantino Star Trek would be like, and have like Jamie Foxx in it, have like all the characters that he's got in like every other movie, right?
Yeah.
It could be so funny if it was like, I've heard Quentin Tarantino is going to be the director of the next Star Trek. This is what it would look like, right?
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson is the captain or something like
Yeah.
that.
Something.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Just like-
barefoot for no good reason.
Yeah, all the girls are bare feet. In Tarantino's
someone
world,
please-
no shoes.
I'm putting it out there. Please, someone who's more talented doing that on a computer than I am, put this together and just give me like 10 minutes of a fake trailer for a Tarantino Star Trek. I think it would just be viral if it's done well, very fast.
That's so good.
Half the people would be like, I can't wait to see this movie, and the other half would just like revolt, right?
Yeah.
And be like, what is he doing?
We need a reboot. But look, even if we don't get a Star Trek 4 today, and by today I mean in the next couple of years, I'm certain that within the next 2 decades there will be another reboot
In our lifetime, for sure.
It's certainly in our lifetime. Yes, I would imagine, because it's still a relatively valuable IP, and it is one of the cornerstones for Paramount as a studio. And I imagine that the TV series will continue in one shape or another. And when the dust has settled, they'll be like, all right, the next generation of children are 13, 14 years old. Let's pump out another Star Trek trilogy. Let's put whoever is the new young hotness in there and go with it.
It's funny that when you look at what streaming platforms are going to look like, Disney is only going to be MCU and Star Wars. And then you're going to go to Paramount Plus, and it's only going to be Yellowstone and Star Trek then, right?
Yeah, totally.
Those are now their two flagship.
And HBO Max is going to get dominated eventually by the DC universe. The only reason it's not now is because the DC universe is so bad.
Yeah.
But I imagine that would be like a strong driving factor for HBO Max as well, or for Warner Media.
If they ever get it sorted out.
Yeah, we don't even know what that website is called yet.
We don't know anything about that.
Discovery, it's HBO, it's...
and same for Paramount. Paratime or Showmount Plus, whatever they're going to do.
Oh, I like Showmount.
Showmount sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to go on that website and be surprised what it is, but yeah.
It's already registered. Showmount. Whoa.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where we're headed with the Star Trek. That it may not be rebooted with Chris Pine and the emo Spock dude, but eventually it's going to be back, and they'll do like another trilogy, it seems.
Undoubtedly. And that's again because I'm a cynic, but there's going to be too much money and goodwill of the IP left for them to not do it.
What is Chris Pine doing right now that he doesn't have time for this? He's not in. There's no more Wonder Woman. Oh, Dungeons and Dragons, yeah.
So
that'll be interesting. I'm gonna check. I'm gonna watch it.
Pete has like a clock counting down.
Does he? Oh,
for that. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was a little bit. The trailer didn't grab me right away, but then Pete kind of explained that he thought it was trying to not take itself too seriously, and he liked that approach. And I've come around to it, but I'm not as big of a D&D gamer as Pete is, but Pete, I think, is like really anticipating it.
The only reason I say that is because the moment you try to take it too seriously, you become another Game of Thrones. You become another, what was it? Lost Kingdom?
Yeah, all the Viking stuff. Yeah.
All the medieval England style show. It just becomes another one of those, which is exactly what happened with the original D&D movie. You can't take that property too seriously because it's inherently not. How can you take the idea of a portable hole or an immovable rod or magic wands, things like that? How can you take that seriously?
Yeah. After you explain it that way, I kind of saw what they were doing. I agree.
Yeah, the trailer might not have done it justice, but I'll still check it out. I mean, my fingers are crossed. My fingers are crossed that they do it well.
Yeah. I mean, of course, as with all movies, we always hope, as fans, we hope that every movie is a good success, right? Yeah. Or if it's at least bad enough that we hate watch it enough, right? I think like Showgirls was famously one of those movies that was so bad that it took on a new life as the must-watch movie so that you could make fun of it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we haven't had one of those in a while.
Not that I can think of, anyway.
Yeah, we haven't had.
For the love of God, Hollywood, do not reboot or remake Showgirls. Let Sleeping Dogs lie.
I was gonna say Morbius was pretty bad, but it wasn't even bad enough to qualify as something that people would watch just for like
just to hate on
value. Yeah. But I thought
everyone
Morbius was
Sony into releasing it a second time. So
really?
Oh yeah. So the online community had a huge, not uproar, but like they were like making it go viral, and Sony took that as a sign as, oh, people are really talking about our movie. We should re-release it. And they re-released it, and I think it made like less than $1,000 on Friday or something like that.
Morbius was re-released?
Yeah.
Where? Like in the US?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I can't remember what, I may be being specious with the 1,000, but it was such a stupidly low number that it was just like, it became a huge embarrassment for Sony that they actually went out and thought that this was a viral thing that people were going to go and watch again, and nobody showed up for it. Yeah,
the virality, I mean, I think is really difficult to gauge, right? Because it's been manipulated so deeply for what was the one, the Schneider cut, right? Which now
Superman
may or may not have been a true grassroots calling, to release that. And then whatever The Rock does for Black Adam, his definition of what's going viral and what the online community is saying obviously is totally fabricated.
Did you guys did you guys supposedly they're doing speaking of The Rock, a Big Trouble in Little China reboot with The Rock?
With The
No
Rock.
way. With The Rock in that?
I didn't know about that until you mentioned it to us in me in the email. And
when we were chatting. Did you look it up?
Who else? Who's the co-star?
No, I refused. When I saw that, I was like, okay, delete. Like, I don't want this to happen.
Why?
I don't either, because you can't have
the original was so good.
You can't have it without Kurt Russell.
It's
he's so good in that.
It's almost sacrilegious to say that you want to replace Kurt Russell and that too with The Rock. And again, no disrespect to The Rock, but like,
no, I love The Rock. Yeah,
but it's Kurt Russell. Like, that's like trying to remake The Godfather and being like, all right, let's get Zachary Quinto in to replace Marlon Brando or something like that.
Yeah, there's a few movies that are really untouchable like that,
Yeah. That's one of them. So, supposedly they're saying it's not a reboot, it's a continuation. And that's their way of trying to get around of being flagged as rebooting a film that everybody
So what,
likes.
Are they going to get 80-year-old Kurt Russell to get in there?
No, he's definitely not doing it. That's one of my points. So like you've got The Rock coming in, you're not going to have Kurt Russell, but it's not a reboot, it's a continuation. It's like, no, it's a reboot. Call it what it is.
Yeah. That's a strange character for him to be playing.
It is. Yeah. So I don't know like what they're going to do it or what. I just literally saw The Rock.
We've had so many conversations about The Rock, who's like almost like universally beloved, Black Adam maybe notwithstanding. And he seems to take like really crappy roles for someone who could probably like, choose whatever, film he wants to be attached to. Apart from like Fast and Furious, he seems to like just choose kind of crappy roles.
Yeah. he does.
Super disappointing. And he desperately wants to be part of a franchise and, part of something like obviously that has, some legacy continuity to it, but he's just not done that.
Yeah, Vin Diesel screwed him over on Fast and the Furious. James Gunn screwed him over on the Warner Brothers on DC Universe. Well, he screwed himself over, but James Gunn helped.
What was he supposed to be in the DC Universe?
Black Adam.
Black Adam, yeah. But it just hasn't done well, so.
No.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. Have you guys seen it?
Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah, we saw it.
Oh, I can tell by that response that I don't need to run out and catch it.
I think the only benefit was it wasn't as long as Avatar or Babylon. I mean, Avatar and Babylon were so long, but at least Black Adam was 2.5 hours, maybe. I mean, by superhero movie, that's
decent time.
Now on the shorter side.
Oh, don't you miss the good old days of a 90-minute
90-minute movie?
Oh man, Creed 3 last night was only, or 2 nights ago was exactly 2 hours. And it just feels like something's different. Like 2 hours, it goes so much faster. But like Babylon was, oh man, I was losing it towards the end. I was just tired, like physically from just like sitting. I'm like, come on, this is a drama as well.
Oh my God.
It's not even an action movie.
Wait. You've raised a great point. We've got someone who's been on that side of the industry. Yeah. Is real Hollywood anything like Babylon?
No.
Too bad.
Oh, come on.
Not to my level, just to be clear. Like I'm down here, right? So maybe up here, maybe that's what it's like. And I think different generation too. Like Hollywood now is very different from Hollywood 30 years ago or 60, 70, however many years ago, right? Like, so current Hollywood is very different. Now it's all about like being cool and subtle and not the lavish lifestyles and
so
that kind of stuff.
No one has asked you to sneak an elephant into an industry party?
No.
I don't remember who the dude was, but I remember him like listening to him on a podcast once, and he's like, why would you want to be famous now? He's like, you should want to be famous in like the 80s and the 90s. You could have done anything you wanted. There were no cameras.
That's Rob Lowe. That was Rob Lowe.
Yeah, that was Rob Lowe, who knows better than anyone. Right?
Who did all that stuff in the 80s. Yeah, exactly.
He's like, why do you want to be famous now? Like, it doesn't add anything. It just puts you under a spotlight. And
you can't get away with anything these days.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, he would know.
Well said by him. What are you watching right now, Milo, by the way?
Besides the first episode of that 90s show and the card.
Yeah.
What are we watching right now?
Like you and your wife, when you like sit down, you're like, look, we've got the whole evening free. Like, what do you choose to put on?
The Crown. We're big fans of The Crown.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Though the current season, not too exciting, the most recent one, but The Crown. And keep an eye out for me. I did some extra work on The Crown. So
wonderful.
So I pop up in there a couple times.
Okay.
Though funny that we actually were watching the other night and there was a scene that I was in. I'm like, I think I'm nope, and nope. But imagine on the side of the screen there, if it continued going, I would be over there. That's where I'm standing. Yeah. We're watching, of course, all the Star Trek stuff because, even if you hate it, you still like it.
Mandalorian.
Yep.
The Last of Us.
I haven't watched it yet. I have it, but I have not started watching it. I will watch it. Have you guys watched The Bear? It's on Disney Plus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's on Disney Plus recently in the UK. We saw it on Hulu last year when it first came out.
Oh, okay. So you've seen it.
It's exceptional.
Mm-hmm. So the acting is so good in that. Yeah, a friend of mine, he's like, dude, have you seen The Bear? I'm like, I've never even heard of The Bear. What are you talking about? And he's like, check it out. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll check it out. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, this is pretty damn good.
So good. I think the second season comes out this summer. So.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of swearing in it, though.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of swearing.
From what I've heard, it's very accurate to the kitchen industry.
Yeah, same thing. I've heard that is not an industry you want to be in if you're sensitive in any way and can't take criticism or any of that kind of stuff because it's very brutal and hardworking and the hours and stuff. there's no way I'd want to do it.
When you said the bear, though, the first thing that came into my mind was the movie that's out now called, I think in the US it's called Cocaine Bear.
Oh yeah, that
Well,
just came out.
here, yeah.
In Dubai, they've changed the name to Crazy Bear.
Of course they have.
I'm like, Crazy Bear? What's Crazy Bear?
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was going to be like
crazy.
animated, you know? And then I saw the poster. I'm like, oh, I think this has a different title. What is it in the UK? You guys are both
Cocaine
in
Bear.
London.
Cocaine Bear. Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely want to see that.
Yeah.
I would have gone this weekend, actually, but it's not playing at the Prince Charles, which is super irritating. So people that don't know, in central London, the Prince Charles is kind of the cool theater where they show like all the cool indie films.
Yeah.
And so that's where I like to go see movies to support those theaters, but they're not playing it. So I have to go to like a big theater to watch Cocaine Bear.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed.
Just recently, I think they did a reshowing of The Mummy in the Prince Charles, and Brendan Fraser showed up.
Ooh.
And he kind of was there in the cinema, not actively mingling, but then he met all the people after the movie finished out on the street. I thought that was wonderful.
How many
that's
people
cool.
can sit inside the cinema? Is it like very boutique-y?
It's relatively small.
Yeah, it's pretty small. And there's what, two cinemas there? Two theaters there, right?
Two screens there.
Two screens,
and
yeah.
I think it can't be more than like 80, maybe 100 people per screening at most.
Yeah,
I don't even think that many.
And it sells out usually?
So
I think it
generally,
depends on
yes,
what they're
because they show like niche
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
You're not going to go there to see a Fast and the Furious movie, and they're
Yeah.
not even going to bother showing a Fast and the Furious movie there. They're going to show the movies that are some things that you'd find on like on the festival circuits, you know,
Okay.
on from Sundance or from Cannes or from Toronto. You'll find movies like that there.
Yeah.
Definitely Cocaine Bear did not make the cut then.
No, I'm so disappointed. So disappointed. Like Kevin Smith, I think when he was touring with Clerks
yeah.
3, was there.
Oh,
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
super
theater.
cool.
Yeah, so if you're listening, Prince Charles,
Yep.
I'll advertise for you.
That's their
I mean,
plug. That's
that's
their
right.
plug.
So Milo, thank you so much. I don't want to take too much more of your time this Sunday morning.
Oh, I'm awake now. Jeez.
For all of you who are interested, this again was Milo Denison. He is hosting a podcast called The 80s and 90s Uncensored. And of course, as he just revealed to us in a shock surprise, he's also appeared on The Crown. So look out.
You really have to look for me.
So watch 2-3 times, you know, but you'll find him.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much, Milo, for showing up and talking to us
Milo,
about
thank you
reboots.
so much for joining us.
Absolutely, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Listeners, we will make sure that we put links to Milo's podcast and wherever else you can find him if you want to reach out to him on the bottom of this episode.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Milo, again for joining us today on Films and Stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.